Most bands get one tragedy, one moment that tests whether they're willing to fight for what they built. AC/DC got 7, the death of their singer, a serial killer waving their merchandise at murder scenes, 3 fans crushed to death at their own concert, a founding member losing his mind, literally, to dementia, a drummer charged with attempted murder, their lead singer going deaf, and the death of the man who started the whole thing. Any single one of those events would have ended most bands. AC/DC survived all of them. But the story of how they survived, what it cost them, what it broke, and what they had to bury to keep going, that's the story nobody has told in full, until today. In 1973, 2 Scottish brothers who had emigrated to Sydney, Australia, formed a band. Angus Young was the lead guitarist, a barely teenage kid who would spend the rest of his career playing in a school uniform. Malcolm Young, his older brother, was the rhythm guitarist and the true architect of everything that followed. By the time they recruited Bon Scott as their frontman in 1974, a 28-year-old who had originally been hired as their driver, the lineup that would change rock music forever was in place. They were loud, raw, and completely unconcerned with what anyone thought of them. Their 1976 UK tour was literally called the Lock Up Your Daughters Tour. Their 1979 album Highway to Hell put them on the map in America. Over 200 million albums sold, a street in Melbourne named after them. The 5th best-selling band in US history, but behind every chapter of that success story, there was a crisis waiting. And the first one almost killed the band before it ever got started. February 19, 1980, AC/DC's frontman Bon Scott, ranked by Classic Rock magazine as the greatest rock frontman of all time, ahead of Freddie Mercury and Robert Plant, went out drinking in London. His friend left him sleeping in a car overnight. He never woke up. He was 33 years old.
Scotland Yard said the body of Bon Scott
was discovered last night in a car.
Post-mortem will be carried out later today.
The official cause of death? Acute alcohol poisoning. Later amended to asphyxiation. He had choked in his sleep. A 2017 biography raised the possibility that heroin was also involved. No toxicology report has ever been made public. Angus Young received the news first, then he had to call Malcolm. Malcolm Young's response to Bon's death tells you everything about who these men were. He called Angus a few weeks later, not to grieve, but to get back in the studio. Instead of the two of us moping about, Angus later recalled Malcolm saying, "We'll just get into the studio and just do what we were doing before. We'll just play away and help us hopefully get through." 6 months after Bon Scott's death, with a new vocalist named Brian Johnson, a man Bon Scott himself had once praised as a great rock and roll singer, AC/DC released Back in Black. A simple black cover, the color of mourning. It became the 2nd best-selling album of all time, and the band kept going. Here's where the AC/DC story gets genuinely dark and genuinely bizarre. In 1985, serial killer Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, was arrested for 13 murders across California. Police found an AC/DC hat at one of his crime scenes. Ramirez told investigators that the song Night Prowler from Highway to Hell had driven him to kill. The media went into full panic mode. AC/DC, a band whose name came from their sister sewing machine, was suddenly being labeled devil worshippers. Newspapers suggested the letter stood for Antichrist/Devil's Children. Cities threatened to ban them from performing. Entire venues refused to book them. Angus Young's reaction? He told Total Guitar, "Fucking hell, why play it backwards? It says it right up front. Highway to Hell." They didn't change a thing. They didn't apologize, they didn't soften a single lyric. And the controversy blew over. Mostly because AC/DC was already too big to cancel. January 18th, 1991, Salt Lake City, Utah. The Salt Palace Arena. AC/DC's Razor's Edge Tour. 13,294 fans packed in. Over 4,000 of them had general admission floor tickets. No assigned seating, no barriers, no section limits. Just an open floor in front of the stage. The band opened with Thunderstruck. The crowd surged. Within minutes, people were pinned against each other. Bodies fell.
Okay, everybody, hang on. We've got a bit of a problem down the front. If you could just move back 1 foot.
People screamed for security to stop the music. A venue security guard named Scott Carter, standing at the barrier, desperately tried to get someone to shut off the sound. I was telling the security guard for AC/DC to stop the music, Carter told MTV the next day.
I was telling the security guard for AC/DC to shut off the music, to turn on the lights, or people are hurting. People were screaming at me.
All I can remember is feeling helpless because I was being ignored. Nothing was being done.
All I can remember is feeling helpless because I was being ignored. Nothing was being done.
The band played 3 more songs before stopping. 3 teenagers died that night. 14-year-old Jimmy Boyd, 14-year-old Curtis Child, and 19-year-old Elizabeth Glausey.
During the band's concert at the Salt Palace's Accord Arena, when the crowd on the arena floor rushed the stage 15 minutes into the show. There were no seats on the arena floor, a policy the Salt Palace has so far refused to explain. Compounding the tragedy for AC/DC, however, were claims by fans and Salt Palace security that the band was asked to stop playing once the stampede began, but did not stop until some 45 minutes into the show. Here now is a sampling of immediate reaction from Salt Lake City the day after the tragedy.
Who was removed from life support 4 days later at her family's request. All 3 had been crushed by the weight of the crowd. The families sued. The cases were all settled out of court. Malcolm Young was reportedly so devastated by the tragedy that he refused to ever speak about it publicly again. You'd think surviving a serial killer controversy and a concert stampede would be enough darkness for one band. In 2014, the same week AC/DC announced that Malcolm Young was retiring due to dementia, drummer Phil Rudd was arrested. The initial charge, conspiracy to procure murder. He allegedly offered an associate $200,000 plus the choice of a car, a motorcycle, or a house to kill his former security guard. The murder for hire charge was later dropped, but Rudd still pleaded guilty to drug possession. Methamphetamine and cannabis were found during a raid on his home, and threatening to kill. He received 8 months of house arrest. Angus Young later told the BBC that the band had already been struggling with Rudd's behavior before the arrest. Even when we were recording, it was hard even to get him to do the recording, Angus said. He was supposed to show up to do promos with us, to do video shoots. He never showed up. Chris Slade was brought back to replace him on drums for the tour. Phil Rudd officially returned to AC/DC's lineup in 2020. In 2016, mid-tour, Brian Johnson's doctors delivered devastating news. If he continued performing at large venues, he faced total, permanent deafness. Johnson later described what performing had become. He was reading guitars not by sound, but by muscle memory and mouth shapes.
With people and just starting to nod and just go.
He couldn't hear his own bandmates. He couldn't pitch. He was going through the motions of being a rock star while going completely silent inside. It was crippling, Johnson told Rolling Stone. There's nothing worse than standing there and not being sure. The doc said, "Deaf is deaf, son." He stepped aside. Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses took his place for the remaining tour dates. Cliff Williams, the band's bassist of 40 years, quietly announced that the tour would be his last. And Malcolm Young, the man who had started everything, who had called Angus after Bon Scott died and said, "Let's just get back in the studio," was already in a nursing home, fading away from dementia. Malcolm Young died on November 18, 2017. He was 64 years old.
For the rock world, saying goodbye to a beloved guitarist today, Malcolm Young of AC/DC has died.
At his funeral in Sydney, the remaining members of AC/DC sat together. Johnson, Rudd, Williams, Angus, for the first time in years. Johnson later said that's when it began, the quiet, unspoken agreement that they weren't done yet. Johnson spent 2.5 years undergoing experimental treatment with a specialist who visited his home once a month. He refused to accept that his career was over. In 2020, against everything, against death, scandal, courtrooms, deafness, and dementia, AC/DC released their 17th studio album, Power Up. It debuted at #1 in 27 countries. Every song on the album was written by Angus and Malcolm Young. In 2023 and 2024, they toured the world again. So here's the real question this band's story leaves you with. We know AC/DC survived everything, but what does it take, emotionally, personally, to be the kind of person who keeps showing up, who loses their singer, their drummer, their brother, their hearing, and still walks out onto a stage in a schoolboy uniform? Malcolm Young once said something simple that explains all of it. When things went wrong, his answer was always the same. See what we can do. Make the best out of the situation. That's not a rock star quote, that's just who they were. Drop a comment below. What do you think is the most shocking chapter in this story? I'd love to know. If this is your first time here, subscribe. I cover stories like this every week, the real ones, behind the music, behind the headlines. I'll see you in the next one.